So, as of the last 24 hours, I have been fired from Asplundh. And I gotta say, it's a real weight off my shoulders. It was really just one of the worst jobs I had to work at. And it's just finally knowing that I'm no longer having to deal with a lot of the stuff that I dealt with there is extremely good for me. So I already made a video about all this kind of stuff before, but I deleted it because I thought I would just make a new one and add some more stuff on there to it. So when I first started, not many jobs I worked at I knew I wasn't going to like right off the bat, but this one was one of those jobs. As soon as I started, I just knew I wasn't going to like it. Um, the training was just very inadequate. The first 3 months there, when I was at the very first crew, I was really hardly trained on anything. Uh, the most stuff they really trained me on was just to set up the cones, set up the signs. That was really it. And when your main job is going to be felling trees, you might want to learn how to either A, do that, or B, learn how to, interact with all of that. But yeah, the first 3 months, the training was it was damn near not there. It really took until my next crew that I really was getting training done. And this is also one of them companies that's all about safety, safety, safety. You know what I mean? And those jobs tend to be the ones that care less about safety in the long run. Because there have been multiple times I've seen people break rules that you could get fired for on the spot if they catch you doing them. I've seen people avoid almost instant deaths. My best example is a few days ago when I was still working. One guy was pulling on a tree branch to try to move a tree over, and the branch broke. And there was a guy like 3 feet behind him with a chainsaw. The blade wasn't spinning, but the chainsaw was on, and he almost fell onto the chainsaw, which could have been good, could have been bad. I don't really know. But the training was just horrible. They don't really show you a whole lot. The general foreman, my general foreman at the very least, never really came around and was like asking me like, hey, how do you like the job? How's the training going? Like, yeah, ask the foreman so he can be updated on the progress, but also you got to ask, the people actually working there because, if your guy's not getting trained, then it's not going to go well at all for the guy. And actually, later on down the line, I learned that the reason they didn't really want to train me was because if something happened, if I messed up, or if something else happened, they didn't want to be held liable. It didn't matter if like I lost a limb or something like that. They didn't care about that. They just didn't want to be held responsible for it happening, which is honestly just one of the worst ways to go about it. My first foreman should have been written up or something for basically telling me that the book that had a lot of the safety information in it was worthless. I might as well wipe my ass with it. It was. He never got in trouble. But in this job, there's a lot of favoritism. I've noticed that there was a lot of times where people were able to do things that they shouldn't have been able to do, even in direct view of the general foreman, and it wasn't an issue. It should have been because sometimes it was a safety issue. Sometimes they were able to do things. Use equipment that they shouldn't be. They were doing there was just a lot of favoritism there, and it was fairly obvious because some people were moved up before they really had a lot of training involved, and that was kind of annoying because it's just like I'm here working. Where's my training? Another issue was just like the work itself. So I got paid around $14. It was just not bad for Texas minimum wage, but just for the work I had to do, and for as dangerous as they claimed the job to be, it's not really all that much. I got paid like 75 cents more working at Sam's Club pushing carts. So the pay wasn't exactly, it wasn't rolling in dollar bills. But they say that if you go through the safety books, you get your orange hat and you get a pay raise. Well, I had constantly brought it up to both foremans and the general foreman, and nothing. They never even really bothered trying to come over and do anything with me, which is what was frustrating to begin with because it's just like I'm doing all this stuff where more often than not, half your guys are just standing around doing nothing, but I'm trying to take the initiative here and actually get stuff done. You know, I was trained how to use the chainsaw. I was trained how to use the bucket, but even with all me repeatedly trying to bring it up to him, like, hey man, I'm learning this stuff. Could we sign me up on the book so I can get that pay raise? He never came around to doing it. And it caused another issue because a lot of the people you work with are going to be Latino, and I don't have a problem with that. But it's really hard to know what the job is, know what I'm supposed to be doing. Getting that training thing going on, getting feeling like you're part of the crew when all they do is speak in Spanish. And if they didn't want to talk to me, that's one thing. You're not making me feel like part of the crew by kind of leaving me out, but, it's one thing. But when you are telling everybody else the job in your native language, that leaves me out, because I only know a very small amount of Spanish. I can ask for a table, I can ask for a coffee or some juice or something, very basic stuff, but I can't have a full-blown conversation in Spanish. And I sure as hell don't know a whole lot of words to know what the hell I'm supposed to be doing. And that got really hard to do, because then I had to look at my guy and be like, hey man, what are we doing? I don't know what's going on. And he would tell me, and it's just like, well, why didn't I know he can speak English, so why doesn't he just come over here since I'm over here and tell us both in English and then go from there? It was very difficult, and sometimes it just kind of felt like they were doing it on purpose, because a lot of the time I heard my name being spoken, but they didn't say nothing, to me directly. The job, it was very frustrating, because they expected a whole lot out of you, but didn't want to give you that. I remember maybe a few weeks back, we was working at a job, and we had a tornado warning. Apparently it was blowing through Big Sandy. We had it was downpouring. It wasn't like super heavy rain, but it rained for almost 17 hours, so you were going to get wet regardless. We had fairly strong winds and thunder and all that, but we weren't getting paid for any of that, because due to us being on the clock, they were not paying us for storm work, even though we were literally in the middle of a storm. Because for whatever reason, you don't get paid storm work and all that until you're basically working over your 10 hours, which kind of got annoying on that, because it's just like we're literally in the middle of a storm. I'm getting drenched, and I didn't even show up the next day because my boots were soaking wet, and I just didn't feel the need to want to come in. I already worked 17 hours, and that may be on me, but then I got written up for that because the next day was mandatory. I was never told that. Like I said, it could be me, but I was never told that. But they don't really pay you for storm work until storm work or emergency work until after your 10 hours, which pretty much means that if you work in the storm all day, heavy ass rain, strong winds and all that stuff, if that storm subsides before the time you normally get off, you're not getting paid for any of that. So you are working in hazardous conditions with really no incentive of doing it. It's mandatory to work in that stuff, because generally you're not supposed to work in the rain. But if it's an emergency, or if it's a certain deal, you have to go out there and work. But there's no incentive to do that. They're not paying you more unless you're, kind of currently off the clock. And that really just kind of ruined a lot of stuff, because it's just like, this is very hazardous. We could get hurt out here. And they always want to say, it's a dangerous job, we want y'all to come home safely. It was like, I want to come home safely too. But your pay is not really worth it, to be honest. Another thing was, I didn't have insurance. They were supposed to give it to me, and I brought it up a few times, but I never received it. I was never given any option to actually get to it. And chances are, if I get hurt, because I already had to pay $500 out of my own pocket for a hospital bill. Granted, it was something I was already dealing with. I deal with arm, elbow issues. So that was already a thing, but, it was a thing of where I could have done it, not had to pay as much, had they given me my insurance like they were supposed to do, but they never did. So not only could I have gotten hurt, and there have been several times to where I almost got hit in the face with a chainsaw. I remember I was cutting one tree and it wasn't cut all the way, and a guy pushed the tree, which pinned the chainsaw, and when the tree twisted, since it wasn't cut all the way, it actually brought that blade up towards my face. It was about like half a foot away. Still a little too close for comfort. And then the guy was like, yeah, see, you gotta be careful, that kind of stuff can happen. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure a fucking tree will fall and damn near chop me in the face if a dumbass pushes it. Yeah, I'm sure. And I even brought it up to the general foreman, and honestly, that should have been on grounds for firing. And granted, I know that it's just my word against his, but an investigation or something should have been put into place. It really was a job where they want to constantly talk about safety, but there was never any safety measures in place. And anytime a safety field was brought up, they just walked over and had a little safety meeting like they always do, and it didn't really discuss anything. And it really just felt like, because as a green hat, I was informed by my foreman, who I guess lied to me about it, because that's what everybody else seems to say, that it's your job to stack, chip, do all this stuff. Pretty much everything that's not cutting, climbing, or using the bucket, it's your job to do. And apparently that was a lie. So, it's good to know that the foremans are lying to you, because to me it really just felt like they basically wanted somebody there to do all the heavy lifting. So they could just do one little thing and just go about their day and rest and relax for the rest of the day. And it was very frustrating because I was feeling that I was working and doing far more than I should have been doing, but I was getting paid for none of it. Because it really just felt like they were pushing more and more work on you, but they were not willing to pay you more. Even if you brought it up multiple times, it didn't really matter what you brought up. Because either they didn't listen or they didn't care. The management was just terrible. There was no communication to any of them, from the higher-ups to the GF to the foreman. There had been plenty of times there was a miscommunication. There had been times we had been sent to the same job 7 or 8 times. There was times where we had been sent to a job we had already completed multiple times. And really, it was just a thing where they seemed to kind of go back on their work. Because I told the guys, right at the interviews, I don't have a car. I rely on my family to drive me. So if you, if you're going to call me for mandatory work at whatever time, as long as you can come get me, or if one of the guys can come get me, I'll be happy to come in. And one day when I was called in, I told him, hey man, I got nobody here to give me a ride, and I got to watch my sister's dogs. So unless, y'all can come down and do the normal thing to come get me, I can't come in. And, I viewed that as a pretty decent excuse, because they said as long as you have a valid excuse, you ain't going to get in trouble for it. But when I went in the next day, he wrote me up anyways. And I'm like, I dead on looked him in the face and was like, so you're going to write me up even though I don't have a car, and I said I had nobody to drive me to work. Physically not being able to get to work. And he just looked at me, that's not my problem. I'm like, really? So you're going to pull this thing just because you're in a pissy mood because you're having an attitude? Alright. If anybody works at this job, there's not even just me. There's been half my crews, before I got fired, most of my crew had already quit. Many others were already leaving. Because the company just sucks. They expect you to work in hazardous conditions. They even told me a few times they had to go through gator-infested waters. They had to go in waist-deep in water. And they weren't getting paid for any of that. At least any extra for all that. And it's really just you're expecting all these people to put their lives on the line while you... Because if we came in and we worked overtime, we got little bits. They got a whole big-ass bonus. So really, it's just they wanted us to work more so they could get paid more. It's just a bad company. It has been one of the worst companies I've ever worked with, and I would not recommend anybody to work with them again. At least the one in East Texas. I'm just happier than hell to be out of that job. It was not worth the stress, was not worth the pay, and was not worth anything. But there it is. Adios.